G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and in this episode, well, I want to talk about the case against the Imperial Fists. Ooh, controversy. Okay, I want to make a video talking about the Imperial Fists and the Horus Heresy, which is a combination of their tabletop love and the background that we're being given on them. Now, this topic came about as a great many people feel I have an inherent bias against the Legion in the negative, whilst for myself, I feel people are way too defensive of the Legion as is being portrayed currently both on the tabletop and in the background. In fact, to that end, I've not seen any other Legion, when picked apart, generate such vehement defense, save for perhaps the Space Wolves, and even then, in 30k, at least they know they're a meme. Now, I don't want this to be a whinge session. Rather, I intend it as an education exercise to see what does and doesn't work, and especially why some of us roll our eyes at the Legion's portrayal. Perhaps it may, once and for all, explain to the Imperial Fist fans why people take issue with their particular faction. No, the Imperial Fists don't have a special place in my boundless ire, but in many ways to me, they are to Heresy what the Ultramarines were to 5th edition 40k. Oh great spiritual liege. Now, let's not let Matt Ward live rent-free in our heads a decade on, and instead, let's get into the show. So, to state the obvious, the Imperial Fists are the poster boys. This is obvious, whether it's from their image on the front of the box game to participation in the CGI trailer. Almost all of the new equipment coming out is in their colours or the Sons of Horus. But to be fair to the Sons of Horus, their Primarch is literally the guy causing the entire conflict, the guy it's named after, so it makes sense for him to be everywhere. And the Legion never felt so forced to me, to such a degree where I was too sick of them. Perhaps the exception to this being their overly fleshed out character range in comparison to many other Legions. Now, the first little segment I'm going to call the Defenders of Humanity. Is it the Fists? Well, I've heard it said that they were crucial to the Heresy. Dawn was the Praetorian of Terror, vital to the outcome of the siege, so it makes sense that he's front and centre. I personally take exception to this, because the Heresy is a decade-long engagement. It starts in the year 005 of Millennia 31 and goes through to 014 of Millennia 31. The Siege of Terror occurs in 014 and Beta Garmin Titan Death in 013. And those are the two campaigns where the Imperial Fists actively contribute their resources. The only other notable large-scale Imperial Fist action takes place at the Battle of Fel in 007, which we'll circle back to. Now that's 3 incidents, granted 3 important ones, in a decade of conflict. Now let's look at some less popular legions, both on the table and in the background, and compare and contrast them. The Iron Hands fight at Isfahan 5 in 006. And under Shadrach Medicine, they fight a campaign leading Shadow Legions for the next 6 years through to 012. This campaign involves their Legion leading other elements, such as Salamanders, Raven Guard, any other Shadow Legion forces they come across. Side by side with this, we have Jagged Eye and the White Scars, who from the Chondax incident in 007 are fighting non-stop against the traitors in Legion-scale actions all the way up until the second last year of the war, when he heads to Terra to join the defences there. Fully 2/3 of the White Scars Legion that they started the conflict with is lost over the course of their Lightning War, including the Legion flagship. Now, could Jagatai, the man who fought non-stop on the front lines for 7 straight years, be a good potential candidate for a hero of the Imperium? Of course not. Painting white is pain in the ass. So, what about Korax? He fought at Isfahan 5, survived 87 days on the run from multiple traitor legions on that world, tying up their resources and manpower, and conducting a guerrilla campaign with what few resources he had. Upon his return to the Imperium, he doesn't stay at Terra to defend it. That's not the place for his legion. Instead, he heads back out to conduct the war he's best at. Sabotage, surgical strikes, destroying supply lines, like a rational human being would. Probably why nobody cares about the Raven Guard in this fictional and cartoonish universe. He saves Russ's life after a failed attempt on Horus's life, assassination attempt, and the Raven Lord takes multiple worlds back with far inferior forces due to his use of actual tactics and strategy. Underrated as hell for a Primarch, and he does this for the entire duration of the war. Still, black is also hard to paint. What about the Lion? As soon as he's made aware of the Civil War in 007, he returns with a vengeance and annihilates the Night Lord's Legion, and gets Guilliman off his ass through his strength of personality, and he's able to convince Guilliman and Sanguinius that they can reach Terra. Along with the Angel and the Smurf, they stabilise the entire eastern half of the galaxy, as well as cleaning up the remaining traitors in that zone. When the breakout finally does occur, he forgoes rushing headlong at Terra for glory because the Lion, like Korax, has a functioning brain, and suggests a campaign to wreck the traitors' backlines. His reasoning being that they can destroy the traitor homeworlds, siphon off resources and troops to protect the rear, and on top of that they can hamper any potential resupply reaching the traitors at Terra. Now this makes logical sense, as if all the loyalists are bottled up on Terra, then the traitors only need to besiege them and overwhelm them through time. Instead, the Lion's forces Horus's hand here, because when Horus arrives at Terra, this is all the resources he will ever command in his hand. The Lion has just 4D chess outplayed Horus. Still, Dark Angels in 30k are painted black, and as per Ravengard, that's a pain in the ass to paint, so moving on. Sanguinius. I'll make this the last loyalist example. But the Angel went into Cygnus and came out on top, being the first to throw back the demonic legions, proving killing demons could be done. He brought the leadership factor to the loyalists in the Imperium Secundus, even if they won't talk about it, and helped lead a coalition of 3 disagreeable legions and their Primarchs, the Dark Angels, the Ultramarines, and the Blood Angels. He tied together people with massive ego complexes. He was the uniter and a visible symbol for the loyalists to actually rally behind, and he was the one who made the run to Terra to join the defense. He was the one who fought Cabana by the Eternity Gate. He was the one who was the angel in the darkness and who fought Horus on the Vengeful Spirit, martyring his life, and like Jagadai Khan could have escaped the snare trap of Terra, but instead, due to his sense of duty and understanding his fate, he chose to take his legion and fight on that world. If the Lion has actual strategy, the Scars fought the majority of the actual war, the Raven Guard achieved the most of their limited resources, while the Angel is the symbol of the Imperium. But here we are, saying that Dawn, the Steven Seagal of the Heresy, sitting in his chair telling others what to do for 8 years, is the true hero. Okay, sure, I don't follow the logic train, so that's why I'm going to call him Seagal. The next section is called Writer's Pets. So we know that the Imperial Fists are just loved by Games Workshop, but let's look at some of their awesomeness as displayed in the Horus Heresy book series. Let's start with a book that's actually nice to the Iron Warriors. Jesus, there's a sentence I thought I'd never say. And that's Angel Exterminatus. In that novel, we are treated to battle at the very start of it, and that battle is to take an Imperial Fist bastion, just a very small fortification, which is successfully holding off the Iron Warriors. So, what is it, like a company versus a platoon, 100 Astartes versus 30 or so? No, it's 30 Imperial Fist Space Marines with light weaponry, bolt guns, holding off a Warsmith and a Grand Company, holding back essentially a massive section of an entire Legion's strength. How much? Well, Book 3, page 112, sources are important, tells us that it's a heavily mechanized force totaling between 3 and 5 line companies and their attendant troops, as well as attached Mechanicum detachments. We are told below that a single line company is a minimum of 100 Astartes and 20 to 50 heavy armoured units. That means that the Yellow Jelly Beans were holding off between 300 and 500 infantry and between 60 and 250 armoured vehicles, if you pick high or low end. They did this with the strength of walls and 30 guys with bolt guns. Sure, why not? Now, to actually break the siege, it took the actual intervention of Perturabo and 9 Iron Circle Domitar breaking into the fort via deep strike. That's the equivalent, by the way, of 2,500 point army on the table being required to fight 300 points, just in case you want to play that battle out at home and think you'll last past turn 2. Where was I? Oh, examples, right. So, in the same book, it turns out that when Fabius modifies and mutates any legion, they devolve into mindless monsters, but the Imperial Fists, they maintain all their faculties. They are so superior, their minds aren't broken by surgical mutilation. Let's move on to John French and his collective works, such as Book 3 Extermination and the Crimson Fist. If you want to say I have a bias, I definitely have an anti-John French bias. Now, the two go hand in hand, Book 3 Extermination and the Crimson Fist, because he's the guy who wrote the Iron Warrior and Imperial Fist sections in said books and is credited as such in both works. He was the gentleman that introduced us to Perturabo decimating his legion for, I don't know, winning but not winning well enough before they met him. I'm still kind of unclear on the logic, but basically anything to make Perturabo into an unlikable villain is fine, I guess. So simply ordering his men into meaningless frontal assaults, which would show his callousness and disregard for his men's lives, as war is just a mathematical certainty to Perturabo, that wouldn't destroy his character and would do just as good a job of explaining who he is, but I digress. It's fisting time. We meet Alexis Pollux, a generally well-regarded character, who, with less than a third of the Imperial Fist fleet, takes the fight to the entire Iron Warriors Legion in the Void, and nearly wins the engagement. This battle never happened, by the way. It was an introduction into the Heresy, in order to get the Imperial Fist actually involved in the conflict as of the new series. Page 49 of the third book tells us, however, with a Primarch at the head of the Legion, their failure may have seemed impossible, but if the Great Betrayal taught us anything, it's that not even a Primarch is without flaw. Perhaps Perturabo did not anticipate Imperial Fist's readiness. Perhaps he was blinded by his hate and need for vengeance, and could not see a path to victory. Yada yada. It goes on for a while, listing how much of a waste of genetic material he is. Again, did I mention this was written by John French? Anyway, when it gets to Pollux, on the other hand, it's the opposite. Also, the skill of Pollux is not to be underestimated, for just as there are human minds who might rival an Astartes, there are Astartes who touch or even exceed their fathers. Suck him off harder. Please, I dare you. Do you not understand the character assassination going on here, anyone? We're being told that there is a Marine here who potentially will outfight any Primarch in a space engagement. With 1/3 of a fleet, Pollux nearly wins being ambushed at Fel, and only loses because at the moment of victory and the potential assassination of Perturabo, the destruction of the Ironblood, his flagship, the Fists receive an order from Dawn to return to Terra. So, exercising 0 command initiative, Pollux says, well, best to throw away a winning battle. Now, I'm pretty sure that if he stayed and said to Dawn, hey, I delayed leaving for 15 minutes after your signal, but I killed Perturabo and his fleet, he probably would have gotten away just fine without a reprimand. That's called taking the initiative in battle. But instead, this decision to leave saves the Iron Warriors and the incompetent Perturabo. A man so incompetent, he nearly beats Dawn at Terra. So if he's so incompetent, how can he present a viable threat at Terra? I'll leave that one to you, but good viewer, you need to decide how characterization works in storytelling, and if a person is incompetent, what are the stakes? As a side note here, I'm going to give you a quick history lesson because I want to use this video for informative purposes, not just for salt. And when I talk about using initiative as a commander on the battlefield and Alexis Pollux leaving due to his orders and how I think it's bullshit. Imperial of Mankind legions are sort of analogous to the legions of ancient Rome, okay? Those legions, ironically, beat the Greek phalanx at a famous battle in 197 BC called Cynocephaly. At that battle, the legion squared off against the phalanx. On the left flank of the legion, the phalanx formed up, and their impenetrable spear wall was massacring the legion. On the other flank, however, the Romans charged in before the phalanx was fully formed and beat it. Now, as their forces were pursuing the enemy on that right flank, a junior officer saw what was happening on the left, and he stopped several hundred of his men from continuing the pursuit. Instead, he wheeled his forces around and then flanked that phalanx which was massacring his comrades. Now, this broke the back of Philip V of Macedon's army, and the Romans won the war. That's called using your initiative. Pollux should have finished what he started at Fel, trading 1/3 of a legion for the destruction of an entire legion and the principal siege specialist of the enemy military, who is probably going to lead the assault on your homeworld, is probably a good trade in any accounting of the situation. Anyway, long short of it is, Perturabo apparently is incompetent, and even the Astartes and the Imperial Fist are superior in intellect to the Iron Primarch. Now, gameplay. On the table, the Imperial Fists just dominate. Why they do so is actually a complex equation. I'd get the mathematical Perturabo to explain it for me, but since he's clearly a petulant idiot who, according to the masterful writings of John French, I'll have to explain it in short. First off, legions have specialities. World Eaters are good in close combat. Iron Warriors dominate anti-tank shooting. Their war gear also demonstrates this, with World Eaters equipment, for example, devoted entirely to close combat. Imperial Fists, however, have an amazing shooting bonus which affects nearly every unit in the game, at a time when many legions get 0 bonuses from their trait for many of their units. When it comes to war gear, they have not just ranged weapons. They are one of 2 legions with access to the assault cannon, but theirs is superior thanks to their shooting bonus. On top of that, they also have the single best item of defensive war gear in the game, the Vigil Pattern Storm Shield, which provides one of only 2 3+ invulnerable saves to the game. They have easy access to it. The only other Storm Shield is the Salamander's one, and it merely grants a +1 invulnerable save. On top of this, they have one of the best melee weapons in the game, the Solarite Gauntlet, a Strength 10 AP1 melee weapon. They also have a Specialist console, one of only a few legions that do, and surprisingly, considering that they aren't a specialised legion like say the Thousand Suns, who only have access to stock legion HQs, the Imperial Fist console, he isn't some bare bones option or middling utility. Take the Emperor's Children console, he's basically equal to a legion champion. No, that would never do for the Imperial Fists. Their console makes legion heavy support into line. Now, 3/4 of the legions cannot even make their specialist units into line infantry without very restrictive rights of war, and even then, many of them are not lined. They're not scoring, they are merely troops. The Imperial Fists take this guy, and he makes heavy support troops line with 0 drawbacks. Lastly, their rights of war are amongst, if not the best in game. To pick one, I think their best one, the Stone Gauntlet. It makes elite breacher units into scoring troops choices with boosted invulnerable saves, which get rerolls, and boosted feel no pain when holding objectives, with the elusive weapon skill 5 also available to them. The downside, they don't have a huge number of attacks. Boo-hoo. So in short, they have all the tools and the ability to use them at all ranges. They are fantastic at shooting, and they are fantastic in close combat. They can take their special legion units who score, unlike many legions, and on top of that, they become virtually unkillable, and on top of that, they have firepower superior to all but one legion, and even then, that legion only gets their bonus against tanks versus against everything. Do you see a problem with perception of power here if you're someone who is not playing Imperial Fists? Let's say you're playing Thousand Suns, and half your legion actually gets no bonus from your legion trait because it doesn't affect things like dreadnoughts or vehicles, because it relies on having a Psyker Sergeant. And they're looking at this legion going, wow, you kind of got it all. Lastly, the Primarch. Oh, Rogel Dawn. Unlikable stoic Rogel. They love him so much that they are naming 40k guard tanks after him. They cannot even name the guard tanks after famous guardsmen. That's how much Modern Games Workshop cares about the guard. Rogel Dawn fits into a funny niche, and my biggest bugbear is that he's better in close combat than he has any right to be. Why? Well, weapon skill is a huge deal in Heresy 2.0. If you have just 1 point higher of weapon skill than your enemy, they go from hitting you half the time to hitting you 1/3 of the time, and you go from hitting them half the time to hitting them 2/3 of the time. It is massive for damage mitigation, more than lifting, ballistic skill, or strength by a single point ever could be. Now, who fits into that area? Well, let's see. Wargar, weapon skill 6, so he is the weakest of the Primarchs in that regard. In the weapon skill 7 category, we have Khan, Ferrus, Guilliman, Vulcan, Corax, Perturabo, Mortarion, Magnus, Alfarius. Now, I would consider Perturabo or Ferrus or Guilliman all very similar in trait and personality to Rogel Dawn. Weapon skill 8 category, we have the Lion, Russ, Sanguinius, Fulgrim, Kurz, Angron, and Horus. So the real beatsticks of the Heresy. But Dawn, fucking Rogel Dawn, what category is he in? He's in the same skill zone with a sword as Russ, Angron, the Lion, Fulgrim, and Sanguinius. Not even Jagged-Eye Khan or Corax, avowed close combat Primarchs, have weapon skill 8. But Dawn, fucking Rogel Dawn, does. Worse, people defend this by saying he beat Fulgrim at Terra. This is where I have to diverge slightly from the video and state that this is as a fact, okay? Some stories are just bad, and the Siege of Terra series is awful. Controversial? Sure. But there's a lot of reasons why I feel that it can be objectively demonstrated, and maybe one day I'll make that video. Suffice to say that if you like it, that's great, and I won't call you wrong for liking it. But like The Last Jedi, there are some pretty objective faults with it that don't go away just because you like the story. So keep that in mind when I make the statement. Now with that said, do you think that Rogel beating Fulgrim was what was needed in the story? What was best for telling the Siege of Terra, a story that can only be told by that event happening? How it is that a key piece of the puzzle that lays the groundwork for the future of the conflict takes place? Or do you think that maybe this is like when Arya in Game of Thrones kills the Night King, where they did it because the people making the story felt like it and nobody better was around to stop them from doing it? I'll let you decide when it comes to Fulgrim losing to Rogel Dawn. In any case, Fulgrim has topped 2 Primarchs. Khan and Mortarion fought to a standstill that essentially killed them both. Russ and Horus fought to the point of mutual death as well. Sanguinius dies to Horus, barely. And you're telling me that Rogel Dawn is their equal or better on the tabletop? I'm sorry, I just don't buy that. Now, could you imagine Dawn fighting the Lion in a duel? Yeah, nobody can imagine that going Dawn's way. Weapon skill ate my ass, and yet Dawn and the Lion are apparently same skill with the blade. Well, that brings us to the end of the episode, but we're not quite done yet. Because as we reach the end of the video, you're probably sitting here feeling very jaded, more so than when we started. Oh, Mr. Circle, you negative Nancy, how dare you point out the glaring inconsistencies in the book? You're trying to find fault. Why can't you just be happy with the hobby you have? Well, dear viewer, it's not negative to find fault. In most industries, fault finding is called quality control. And when it comes to reviewing products, you want the truth. Car, video games, hotel, film reviews, they're all accepted as necessary, and it's especially frustrating when said reviews are lies. But Warhammer always gets a pass. This billion-dollar company gets a pass because they're, I don't know, a game, stretched for resources, who knows. What's important here, though, is that I give you the story as I see it. And I cited it, I told you what pages to find these bits of the story on. And if there is a bias, it's not an Imperial Fist bias. It's a bias that I hate shonky rules writing and bad background writing. And the two together are utterly awful. Many cannot see past their rose-tinted glasses, and I wouldn't have a critical thought being able to be given to some of these people even if I could beam it directly into their skulls. They not only wax salt, they're a pool of fresh water, okay? Begging for each release and suckling from the tea to mediocrity. This video is not made for those people. This video is made for you, the valued viewer with an open mind, the person smart enough to watch the video, and even if you disagree with it, at least you're able to digest where I'm coming from. And to you, I say thank you. You're the people who give me hope that we may yet reverse the trend of decline in this hobby. Because I love this hobby, I truly do. That's why I'm so involved and so passionate about it. It's sad because I've been watching 20 straight years of corporate imposed decline, where the reason they're still relevant is because they raise prices faster than players leave, and it's the only reason they're able to remain profitable. I don't want this hobby to die this way. That's why I make this content, to make you understand, or to give voice to those who don't have the reach and can't get their comments out there because they get deleted by overzealous admins on forums when they speak their feelings. I love the game, and I'm asking you as the viewer to work with me and let the company know a very important truth. That Rogel Dawn sucks.
Don't mention it, brother.
Mac with the Outer Circle. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.